Hello and welcome to today's episode of Webflow and Code, where I teach you the underlying code that you're writing in Webflow. Today's episode will be all about transitions and how you can speed up your website by understanding a little bit about transitions and how the browser repaints your website. Webflow lets you transition any property, whether it be on click or on a hover. And believe it or not, depending on which property you choose can actually affect the performance of your website. TLDR only transition opacity, perspective, and transform. Every other property actually is a bit of a performance hit on the website. The browser goes through 4 key rendering steps. The first time your page load, it will go through all of these steps, but being mindful about and limiting the number of steps it needs to take after that point, we can really speed up the performance of a website. The first step is taking what we call the HTML DOM and the CSS DOM and combining them together and just matching up the class names and the HTML and just understanding how they all link together. The second phase of this is to actually, the browser will work out the position, the layout, the size, and calculate everything at this point. This is quite heavy because obviously some elements will affect the layout and position of other elements. So it's a real kind of heavy process to do this. Once it's done that, it actually paints the pixels, pixel by pixel, of every single element, whether they're overlapping or whatever. It will just paint all these elements on the screen. And then finally the browser then actually presents you the layout and that's what you see in the end. I can demonstrate this using a hover event on like a simple link here. So on this link I'll animate it using a property that forces the browser to repaint, and then on this one I'll use a property that doesn't cause any sort of repainting. So what I want to do is just kind of, I guess, just move this a little bit just to make it a little bit more interesting. So the first thing I'll do is I will set my transition to transition the left property, okay? And I'll set my position to 0 on the left hand side there. And then on the hover event, what I'll do is I will set that as a left of, say, 10 pixels. So just go back here, we have a little look, and then we can see that just hovers out there. On this one, what I'll do is I'll set my transition on the transform property, which transform, as you remember, doesn't cause the browser to repaint. And so what I'll do, I'll set my move to 0 and whatever, so I'll leave that as a default. And then on hover, what I'll do is I'll make sure that is, yeah, that's fine. And then I'll edit this to say 10 pixels. So they're doing exactly the same thing. One of them is just using a method that causes browser to repaint. The other one isn't. And if I publish this, to publish, and I've got something here. So I've got Firefox, and what I've done, I've set the browser to show me what repaints, right? What you'll see is that when I hover over this link, the color's not changing. Whereas when I hover over this link, you'll see, look, it's just spazzing out. It's just kind of going, it's changing color, meaning it's just repainting. This one is just nice and smooth. The other thing you can do, and it's a little bit hard to see, maybe I'll just refresh the page. You might be able to see that actually it's just a little bit more janky than this one. This one tends to be a bit smoother, whereas this one there's just a tiny little bit of stuttering, and we're only dealing with like a little link here, so you won't be able to see it as clearly. But if you can imagine, if we're animating like a menu in or doing some huge animations, you'll really see that jank. So this is just a prime example of how we can reduce that kind of repainting that we spoke about. There's also a website that I found called CSSTriggers.com, and I'll link it below in the description, but it shows you an outline of what properties actually cause repainting and what doesn't. And it's really detailed actually, because different properties actually affect different parts of the animation cycle. I don't think they're particularly relevant for Webflow, but because there's only so many things you can actually do in Webflow. But it's just an interesting table to look at, and it's quite easy to follow as well. So I hope that's helped you understand a little bit about transitions and what's going on behind the scenes that the browser's doing, and how we can be a bit more mindful about the transitions we make and how that affects performance on the website. Webflow does a great job under the hood of only animating the transition property when we use the animation tool, but it doesn't quite have that control in the transition feature. So of course we can transition any property that we like, but if we're really thinking about performance, if we can do transitions using just those 3 key properties, then we'll have a much smoother website. But of course you can't avoid transitioning color or background color or various things like that. So I think we can just be more mindful going forward. As always, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try and get back to them and clarify anything. If you have any ideas or anything that you want clarified in Webflow, let me know and I can hopefully make a video on that. And so until next time, happy no coding.